Hello, everyone, and welcome to the conversation room. Today's topic is solidarity. Why is it necessary, and what are our challenges? My name is Ellen Wagner. My pronouns are she, her. I'm currently tuning in from Princeton, New Jersey, the United States. That is at the East Coast. And I am super curious who is watching us right now. So please interact with us in the chat and let us know from where you're tuning in. So just type in the chat from where you're located right now. You can name the city and the country or the state. And I'm just super curious who is tuning in right now. So who am I? I am the founder and CEO of Cross Cultural Bridges. This is a company that supports organizations not only in the US, but also in Germany and Europe in creating inclusive cultures. So my special focus is on anti-Black racism and LGBTQI topics, but we are also talking a lot about unconscious bias, diversity, equity, inclusion, and all of these topics. Today, I'm not alone here. So we're going to talk about approximately 60 minutes. And I'm just gonna check in the chat. There's somebody, Malaika, saying hello, hello. Sarah says, hi guys, and tuning in from Hamburg, Germany. We have Kathleen from Leeds. Hi, Kathleen. Sharon from Barbados. I know Sharon. And we have Kim from Porto, Portugal. And then we have Anselmo from London. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. That is so exciting. Thank you. So we have worldwide audience tonight or this afternoon or this morning, depending on from where you're tuning in. That is super great. And I'm glad that you found your way to the chat. So you can use the chat throughout the next hour and type in your comments. Unfortunately, we don't see any hearts popping up or any thumb up. So please do that in a written way through the chat so that we know that you're there and you can agree, you can disagree with us. That's totally fine. This conversation room is for all of us. So we have probably a diverse crowd listening to us. So I just want to ask you to be mindful with the language that you're using and be respectful. It might be, and I probably think this is going to be a tough conversation, or maybe a conversation that is not always too comfortable for everybody, even for ourselves. Because we're going to talk about discrimination, injustices, and privileges. And these are super personal topics. Just when we met here, we were saying like, oh, wow, we're all super excited to have this conversation. So there's a little bit of anxiety. There is joy, of course, but it is a tough topic. And we're different people here. We have different perspectives, and we welcome that and we embrace that we are different. But we still try to be mindful about the way we talk about this topic or how we express our opinions. Okay, so who is here? On my side is Alma, but Alma is going to introduce herself in just a second. And we also have Theo here. So I don't want to talk any further and leave you to the floor. Alma, would you like to tell us who you are and maybe what you do, and maybe also from where you are tuning in?
Okay, thank you very much, first of all, Ellen, for having us, for inviting us to that discussion round. I'm very much excited to be here, actually, and I'm very inspired by your work, and so am I also in regards to your work, Theo. I'm very happy to be here and to share that discussion round with you. So my name is Alma Kaiser. I labeled myself as an author and activist in preparation for this discussion round today. But obviously those are only labels. But I guess, what my work always aspires for is to understand my role as a white woman, a white German woman from an educated middle class background in in struggles over social justice. And my academic background is in anthropology and linguistics, and later I did a master's in inequalities in social science. And in order for you to understand from where I speak, from where I listen, I think it's very important to know that my family background is partially white German Brazilian. And I spent a very formative year in Brazil when I was 16 years old, where I became very much aware of my own whiteness. I think I had been already aware of my whiteness, but there I experienced so many privileges due to the mere fact of me being white, German, having blue eyes, blonde curls. And I think what stuck out the most to me was that people would listen to me all the time, and they would consider me to be a knowledgeable person all the time by the mere fact of me being German and white. And I guess that is an experience, that led to my decision to study inequalities. And I'm the author of 2 articles, one academic, one not academic, and both grapple with systems in which oppression takes place. And I guess in almost any system, there's oppression, and particularly how those who do not experience inequality and oppression take, like, what is their role in the struggle over social justice within these systems and against oppression. And I think that is my major topic, and that is why I'm very, excited to be here. And that is me.
Thank you so much, Alma. Theo, would you like to go next?
Yes, my name is Theo Kauffeld. Theo is a nickname for Theresa, just that you're not confused with my name on the screen, maybe. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the co-founder of the startup Equalista. We're trying to build a learning app that educates people around gender equality and social justice. We have started that journey 3 years ago, and we thought that would be super easy, just provide educational content, and then everyone will convert to social justice people. But over the 3 years, we learned that it's actually much harder than just to provide educational content. It's about motivation. It's about what makes people want to learn about social injustice, and what, even more importantly, what makes them take action. So the last 3 years, I have watched the social justice bubble very closely, participated very closely. We lived in Berlin, which is an intense city to deal with those issues. And we have developed an approach that we are implementing right now, and that we are going to talk about as well tonight. And I'm tuning in tonight from Gothenburg, so Sweden. So we have the US, Germany, and Sweden, even though I am originally from Germany.
Yes, thank you so much, Theo, for your introduction. And yeah, as you see, the crowd out there comes from different countries. We live in different countries, but we are aware of the English language. There are so many layers, and sometimes I even find it hard as a native speaker of German to express my way the correct way. So let's be kind to each other if we are using a language that might not be exactly to the point. But maybe we can discuss if there are any misunderstandings. And the first questions that I wanted to ask you is why we are here. And you already gave a little bit of context, what you're doing, where you're coming from, and why you are willing to talk about this topic. And maybe I can give a little background. So I met Theo through social media, I believe, from LinkedIn. And we got in touch, and we had a virtual coffee, and it immediately clicked because we felt not that we always have the same opinions, but we have a very similar vision to make the world more just. And we quickly found out that there are different ways to get there, and that it's okay that there are different ways. So I also used to question the way that I educate people on, let's say, anti-racism, because there's a spectrum. There are people who are very radical, who do not allow any mistakes. And there are other people, maybe like me, who have a little bit more empathy for, let's say, whiteness or white people asking questions. So it is very interesting how we move, and that over time we also change maybe our position or our opinions and our mindset and the way we look at the world. And Alma, I met you also in the digital space, and it was a similar feeling, right? So very quickly we were talking about whiteness, and that doesn't normally not happen very often, that I meet white people and we can talk about whiteness. And I encouraged you, because we were talking about, is it possible for you to talk about anti-racism as a white person? I said, and I encouraged you, yes, from a white person's perspective, talking about whiteness, it is possible. And I think this is why we are here. There are different opinions, and we do have different opinions, and let's share these different opinions. So my next question would be, what do you understand by the term solidarity? And why is it important that we are talking about solidarity with each other? So I don't know who would like to start. Alma, maybe I go with you.
Okay, thank you. So this question reminds me of the fact that very recently I went to an exhibition here that took place for 1 year here in a museum in Cologne. By the way, that I forgot, I'm tuning in from Cologne, Germany. And the exhibition...
Rotenstrauch. I think it was the Rotenstrauch.
Exactly,
yes.
Rotenstrauch Museum, and it's the anthropological museum. So it's a very, difficult space, because lots of robbed artifacts, let's say, are being stored over there, and they're obviously, it's a complicated space, and they organized an exhibition that was called Resist, on anti-colonial resistance, and it was a very powerful exhibition. And when I went outside, there was a book where people could write, and one of the questions that I found was, what is resistance to you? And the first thing that I wrote down, and this is why I answered with that little anecdote, is that for me, resistance is solidarity. Because obviously I'm a woman, so I make certain experiences, like I make certain lived experiences of inequality, but my life is predominantly shaped by many privileges. But I have always had my ears and eyes wide open, to mechanisms of oppression, marginalization, silencing. And so what I can do is to be solidary. And for me, solidarity never stops. Solidarity is omnipresent wherever you are. It is opposed to charity, because charity is something people organize an event and give some money, donate some money, or like raise funds for something. And that is also fine. It can be part of solidarity. But charity, for me, at the end, there is applause. There are people clapping, and saying, what a kind of a good person you are. Whereas solidarity can be a very silent act. It can be holding space. It can be listening. It can be speaking up in situations where it's highly uncomfortable. And I guess for me, it's actually resistance to a system in which people experience oppression. Yeah.
Thank you, Alma. And before we go on with you, Theo, Annette, who's in the background, I'm waving to you. You can see me, but we cannot see you, is kind of new in my team, not too long in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion, so to say. And she gave me a very good hint, like, Ellen, you're using a lot of terms in your language that is hard for some people to understand. And I always say, well, you can Google. I say that in my conversation rooms oftentimes. And what I mean with that, you have to do the work, right? You have to educate yourself. But also being a professional and educator, of course, I'd like to educate you. So when Alma was talking about forms of oppression, and maybe this is the term that I just want to explain, these are forms of discrimination, of exclusion. That can be sexism, which is the discrimination towards because of gender. It can be racism because of the skin color, the name, or your heritage or your culture. So yeah, just to clarify that. And now I'm going to hand it on to you, Theo.
Yeah, for me, I would say solidarity is mutual support and working together and uniting over a shared goal. So for me, it's really important that at Equalista, we started our social justice journey with gender. But I'm always surprised that it is possible for some people to only focus on one form of oppression, because I see all forms of discrimination and oppression as interlinked, and I see all people as interconnected. So I think it's impossible to see only one form of oppression and ignore the rest. So for me, very quickly, after I started researching gender, I became aware of that a lot of the same mechanisms are at play as well for other forms like skin color or sexual orientation or disability. So for us, it is really important to more understand the mechanisms behind discrimination so that we have a blueprint that we can use for many different forms of discrimination. And so for me, my solidarity is basically with all people that experience injustice and discrimination in some shape or form, and with everyone that wants to end that discrimination as well. So my solidarity doesn't only go into the direction of marginalization, but it is with everyone, and I'm including everyone that wants to be part of the solution. And that doesn't require that we think alike or that we think the same strategies will lead to the goal. We can have very different opinions on what the right steps are that we need to take. And with some, I will work more closely because it will be productive, and some I will be cheering on from afar, and really hope that what they are doing will bring us a step closer, even though it's not resonating with me directly. So as Alma said, solidarity can take different forms, but for me, it's always an action. So I know a lot of people who talk about solidarity or think about solidarity, but I think what matters is really the steps you're taking. As Bell Hooks says, love is a verb, and I say as well, solidarity is as well a verb. It's what we're doing.
Thank you. This is nice listening to you, Theo, and I'm going to continue with you. You were just talking about it is okay if we have different opinions and if we are different. So what is your take on working together, having different opinions and having differences? How can we do this and still work towards a common goal?
Mm-hmm. It's for me, that is actually, I have to talk about my own evolution in the social justice space, because when I started, I was basically just reading and listening to other people, and without thinking for myself, I just thought what they are saying is right. And I just did the same thing. I criticized the same thing. I did the same things. And when people asked me questions, I got angry because it was actually not my own thoughts, and I was actually not sure whether I'm really behind this. So for me now, over the years, I learned there are different strategies. We might have a shared goal, and that is to end oppression and discrimination. But none of us knows actually how we will get there. There are a lot of very smart people that have really good ideas and that have theories and that have strategies. And some of them are actually the exact opposite from each other. Some say we need a quota, others say we don't need a quota. So it's like, and a lot of people always say like only one can be right. But we don't know what is right because no one knows actually how we will get to the goal. So if we imagine the goal like an area where we want to shoot our arrows, I think we need many different arrows to shoot in the same direction and hope that one of them will reach the goal. And I really encourage everyone to add a new arrow to the game or to the shooting, because we will just increase the likelihood that one of us will bring us closer. So I actually excited when there are new approaches and when people disagree, because that means that we increase the likelihood that we will get there. But of course, it's not easy when you disagree. It's actually a skill that you really have to learn, to hold disagreement, and to as well say, okay, maybe we're not disagreeing on that, but let's for a moment focus on what's uniting us. Let's remember we're on the same team, even though we have different strategies and different roles. You know, not everyone can be the goalkeeper. We need like lots of different types of players on the field. But I think actually more important than social justice educational content is what we call at Equalista social emotional learning, and that are communication skills. It's being able to hold disagreements. It's being able to communicate respectfully. It's being as well to be able to see someone else's suffering, because that is really deeply uncomfortable and we want to avoid that and we want to run away. But it's as well showing empathy. It's saying like, maybe you mistreated me, but I can still extend compassion in your direction. And those are all skills, social skills, that have not so much to do with social justice, but they enable what we need. So I think personal growth, communication skills, that is what actually enables us to work together. And yeah, that is something that I think we don't talk enough, that it's basic skills that we really should learn in school, but we don't. So we need to do the work now.
Thank you. You're muted.
Yeah, classic. It was me first. Yes, 10 points. So what I wanted to say is that it's actually very good to know that this is a skill that everybody of us can learn, and we just have to do it, right? And you mentioned, I wanted to ask you, so how can we learn the skills? What are elements of that? But you explained that already. So I hope everybody out there is having a pen and paper, or more sustainable, their phone to type in all these tips. And I hope you can post about that afterwards. And yeah, also you can put your key learnings here in the chat. And Jasmine is writing, yes, I love that point about the communication skills. I will take that into practice. There you go. And Alma, any takes on that? What Theo just said?
Yes, many thoughts. So first of all, I would love to say that I like that you said that solidarity for you is taking action and doing things. For me, the doing can also be not speaking, but listening. I mean, that is something that is very, very important for me. And I guess that is like a huge part of my anti-racist practice. And obviously, like, my point of view, I love how you see all different forms of experienced inequality as interlinked and interconnected, and that we're all in that together, basically. And the other point I wanted to draw on, and that is linked to what I just said, is that you said we need to learn how to communicate and to disagree with each other. And I think that is particularly powerful. I mean, that is powerful because we are two white people talking about social justice, basically, and about solidarity. And I think one thing we can do, and that is now my personal take from an anti-racist point of view, because, like, for me, what I grapple with is always how white people can engage in anti-racist practice. Is that white people, like, that would be something, that would be solidarity for me, and doing something that white people talk amongst each other about racism, about forms of oppression. And I think that doesn't happen very often because it's very uncomfortable. And that is something that I would like to, like, I'm saying that because of the disagreement thing, that we need to learn how to disagree. And I feel that is my thesis, that is my argument, basically, that for white people in anti-racism, it's very difficult to talk about racism and anti-racism because we constantly want to be the better ally, so that we always constantly want to prove that we are the better one and that we know more. I experience that very, very often when I talk about racism with white people, that it quickly becomes a battle because I have more Black friends and I do know better because I read all of this and that and I watched that movie and I know better, but that is not the point. And that is also why, for me, allyship is difficult. The term allyship, I don't know if everyone knows about it. It's a term to coin, basically. It's difficult to not use the word solidarity because I actually want to say how allyship differs from solidarity. But to stand in solidarity with people who experience racialized oppression. But and that is inspired by Emma Dabiri. I'm showing the book very quickly, What White People Can Do Next, From Allyship to Coalition. She says that allyship recenters the white person as, the selfless one, the one who does good, but then there occurs a recentering of the white person in anti-racist struggle. And I think I'm saying all of that, and I don't know if it becomes very clear, maybe you can ask afterwards, but I'm saying all of that because I think all of this is a lot about how we commit to each other, in social justice struggles. Like, do we actually listening to each other, and do we treat each other with care, and do we hear each other, and why am I actually here? Why am I so concerned? And I think these are questions that we need to pose ourselves, when we engage in social justice movements.
Thank you, Alma. And now I'm thinking, we prepared, of course, some questions. If the next question that I had in store for you is still relevant, because I think you talked about it. In what ways is solidarity misinterpreted? Yeah. So I would go on to the next question, which is to you, Theo. What does being privileged do to you personally? And why do we use it so little for empathy and solidarity when it comes to learning and communicating?
Yeah, I think that is a super interesting question because I am one of the founders of a social justice app that deals around gender. And normally I talk not from the privileged position, because when we talk about gender, women are one of the marginalized groups. So actually, the main part of my life I spent in a role of marginalization, where I talk from a position of marginalization. And that is a very comfortable position. Of course, when you look from structural discrimination, like we know that women are worse off. But in my job, I actually get to say whatever I want to say because I'm speaking from lived experience. And people forgive mistakes that I'm doing, and they say, like, yes, but it's righteous anger. She has the right to be angry. She has the right to be sad. It's like, I can do whatever I want from that position when I'm really honest. And I think we're here to talk really honest about that experience. Here in this conversation, I'm speaking from a white position that is the privileged group. And that is, for me personally, the way more uncomfortable position. And usually when we talk about, then we say, like, oh no, now, the white person is saying again, she's feeling uncomfortable, but we're talking about like people being marginalized because of their skin color. But for me, as I said, solidarity is the system of privileged and marginalized people. And if we don't take both sides serious, then I don't think that we will find a solution. And there is the saying, if you want to understand someone, walk a mile in their shoes. And we all have privileges and marginalized parts of our identity. And I think we just use our privileged side too little in order to build empathy for the other part of our lives. So since I am really honest with myself about how uncomfortable I am in this position, how much skill I need in order to regulate my emotions in those situations, how I need to work to stay present, to not kind of dissociate from the discomfort. I have a lot more compassion when I'm on the other side. But Alma, you talked about decentering, and that is actually something that I disagree with. We promised some disagreement, and I believe that we really need to separate the systemic layer from the individual layer, because I really think that for all of us, we are the center of our universe. Like for my life, for Theo's life, I'm the center. For Alma's life, you're the center. So whatever I'm experiencing, I can only experience from my standpoint. So when I hear decenter yourself, white people need to decenter themselves, I agree on the structural level. But I think that in face-to-face conversations, we need to connect and each be centered in ourselves, and then connect with our centers and be respectful. But I have the feeling that our world as it is now has a hierarchy because always someone is centered and someone is not centered. And the world that I imagine is actually where we are all centered in ourselves and then be able to connect. And that is my vision. And I know that maybe a step towards that vision is that we learn how to sometimes decenter ourselves. But my goal is that we're actually all the centers of our own universe and get to live fulfilling, full lives, independent of identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I have to re-listen to that once again to understand it completely, because it's tough. Sometimes we enter spaces and we have conversations and then somebody says something. So yesterday I had a call with a white person, and the white person said something like, we don't want to enslave ourselves. Something like a German saying, just using language. And I was chatting with a black person that was also in the call, and that black person already immediately said something like, "Oh, really? Like, come on." And sometimes being in activist spaces, it's almost like we're waiting for the others to do mistakes. So we can call them out, or we can have like our confirmation bias confirmed. Like, see, I told you, white people are bad. I mean, I'm exaggerating now, but sometimes this is actually what we're thinking. And so therefore, I think it's important when we have conversations to really listen, what Alma said before, to get what the people are talking about. So if we talk about racism, so many people don't know what racism is. And just to say it's discrimination because of your skin color, what I said before, that is just not enough. It's a structure, it's an ideology, it's a process. It is so much more. And I think, especially in Germany, when we talk about racism, it's all about interpersonal experiences that people have with other people, what they say, what they do to you, but we leave out the structural component, so that racism is woven into the fabric, into everything, the air that we're breathing, the media, everything in our institutions. And I think it's very important in these conversations to be patient, to let the other person talk, and maybe talk some more, and not judge people just from an instance because I've just met the person and the person is just now confirming something that I was expecting the person to do. And I think this is very hard in these conversations. Alma, you want to add something?
Yes.
I see you. It's like...
Yes. I mean, it goes also into the direction of what Theo said before. And there we are again, like, at a point of how to understand solidarity, because for me, at the end of solidarity, at the core of solidarity, stands an infrastructure of care and of listening and ultimately love, as cheesy as it sounds. But I think that is the true, revolutionary power of solidarity when we consider it, as you said, Theo, that we are all solidary with one another, like as a collective. And I think about, Audre Lorde's little booklet, which is called "The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House." Because once that, what you just said, Ellen, takes place, like we are in a social justice, environment, and people keep also putting people into boxes right away, we are actually reproducing what we are criticizing. And I think that is a big dilemma, but it is also understandable because it derives from a lot of pain. And that is also something that we need to acknowledge, the pain that arises, that is being triggered, in social justice environments. And there again, it is very important that we act with softness with one another, with kindness, to understand as well, okay, the person, judged me because I look the way I look. But at one point, I guess we can begin to listen to one another and also acknowledge our differences and our different experiences, but go beyond. And that is something, that resonated with me when you were talking, Ellen.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also important that it is okay to have all the emotions. I mean, I ask you in the beginning, and also you listeners, to sit in your discomfort when it gets uncomfortable. And I truly believe that this is important. But of course, we have to look at the perspective. So me as a Black person living in the United States at this current moment is really shitty because many people in Germany have not even realized what happened past weekend in Buffalo. And I just want to call out a content warning. I'm going to talk about racism now. So there was an 18-year-old man who killed 10 people in Buffalo in the state of New York. He went into a predominantly Black neighborhood where he targeted Black people. 2 victims of the 13 people that got shot were also white, but the majority were Black. So, and the way, what was even the hardest to read when I followed the news was when that person got arrested, he still had his rifle in his hand. So if you are a little familiar of police brutality in the United States, you know that if a Black person, no matter what age, would kill another white person, that person will not be alive after that. If the police approach, they shoot. And it is even happening that Black people get killed even being unarmed. And there are countless stories that I could give you about the police brutality that I experienced while living in Germany. So I am scared. And just a little story, we needed to buy the car that we were leasing for the past 3 years. And our daughter, who's Black, and I have a wife who's white, was asking my wife if she can take the car with the expired license plate, because now during COVID, it's just taking some time to process. So we have an expired license plate and we're waiting for the new one. And she was scared to drive with me as her Black mom in the car with an expired license plate because she was scared that the police will stop us. And now I'm getting emotional. So my wife told me that and she said, I'm going to take the car. And I said, why? And she said, because I'm white. So within our biracial family, we are very aware of the privileges and the power dynamics. And sometimes, and that this is what I wanted to point out, is that it's okay if Black people are enraged when there is injustice happening to them. And of course, we are asking people to stay calm and listen and be patient. But I really want to point out that it really depends on who is affected by the oppression, and that we cannot always ask people to stay calm during these conversation, and that it's tough. I know it's not it shouldn't be a one-way street, but also we should know when to maybe just shut it and not talk, and show solidarity in that way, that we just listen. Whew, yeah, very uncomfortable for me also to share that too.
I would actually add to that, because you say maybe you need to know when you should just listen, and I actually think we need to be able to do more. We need to be able to provide comfort over difference. We need to be able to hold each other in pain and care for each other, because I really think just listen is just the minimum. It's like I have a bigger vision for that. So it's like it makes me a bit sad when you say sort of when what you're demanding is the bare minimum, what I'm thinking. And after hearing your story, you and I, we talked as well a bit after the weekend, and in a really good advice that I got a couple of years ago is that we should all live more diverse lives, and actually analyze how diverse are our lives, because the closer we get to a diverse group of people, the more we care about diverse issues. And when I saw the news on the weekend, I thought immediately about you in the US, because before that, I actually didn't know a person of color living in the US closely. My bubble is more in Europe. So it's actually when you get closer to people, it's easier to care, and it shouldn't be that way, but that is the way humans function. And we need to be aware that we can create that closeness. Like we can make sure that we live diverse lives, and diverse lives don't always mean that you have friends everywhere. You know, you shouldn't now go and curate your groups of friends to tick all the boxes. But living a diverse life means reading diverse books from diverse authors. It means following diverse people on social media. It means buying products from diverse people. And whenever you get closer to the issues, my theory really is like it's impossible to not care, because we're wired for care and connection.
Am I muted? No, I'm not. Okay. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add that you were one of the few people who reached out to me where I thought, is that really happening? And so I wanted to do a check, like, okay, what's happening in the news? And I rarely see any reports about the incident from the weekend. And therefore I thought, okay, so the people don't know. And then I posted something and I saw a lot of likes, and still like very close friends still didn't react. And I was like, what the F? I mean, I cannot use another language, but after 2020, George Floyd, which is having like a 2-year time now, next week, where I expressed like how angry I was, how upset I was, to my family, my circle of friends. And I told people, you have to reach out to the communities when something awful is happening. And this is really awful. I mean, of course, my bubble, which is super black, on LinkedIn or Insta, they're all grieving and they all try to cope. They all try to be professional and keep working. But how can you keep working when you have all these thoughts in your head? Like, oh, if I go to the grocery, will I come out alive? And I am very privileged. I'm not living in a, let's say, poorer neighborhood in the case of Buffalo. I live in a diverse neighborhood where I'm super safe. Still, I am scared. I'm scared every time I see a police car, because I think if they just want to check and see my driver's license, that can escalate because something wrong will happen. So maybe we can talk about what we can do, how we can draw attention to the topic. And maybe, Alma, we can start with you. And Theo, if you like, you can also share what how you do that with Equalista?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would like to say something in that regard. I loved your post on Instagram, basically saying how, like, indicating how we can show solidarity. And I guess, like, that is one point that I want to make in that regard to what you just said. One thing that I would like people who do not make these lived experiences of racialized forms of inequality or injustice and violence in that case, I think sometimes we do not know how to react. And that is not to justify and it's not to victimize white people, but I think it's a fact. And that is why these conversations that we are having right now are so important, because we need to talk about that and we need to exchange, our experiences and thoughts on that. And I think white people need to talk about that more as well. Like, why are we so insecure in regards to how can we react? And then the other thing that I wanted to say is that it's a total traumatic experience, to read these news. I also went into kind of a state of depression because it's just very depressing. And but that is only on a side note. That is sharing a very personal, experience of that. And I only have question marks and no answers. But how do I draw attention to social justice sorry, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry. How do I draw attention to
the topic of solidarity and what you're thinking? I just wanted to share one, let's say suggestion. Of course, every person is different, but one way to show solidarity when you say that you don't know what to do is just to reach out and send a little heart with a text message, just that the person knows, I see you. I don't expect a long message, and I even find it difficult if people ask me, how are you? Because I don't want to put out all the trauma on the table.
Right.
But again, like Theo said before, if you diversify your life, if you get closer to people who are different than you will have relationships, and you will kind of know how the people react. And in a moment where where they're in peace, you can even say, sometimes I'm unsure how to deal with certain situations. Do you want me to reach out, or is it okay? So we can even get feedback. But my question was, how do you draw attention to the topic of solidarity?
Okay, it's funny because it's 10 to 9 our time, 10 to 3 your time, and there's so much to say in regards to what you just said, but so I'm just going to reply to your question. But thank you very much for sharing, and I really appreciate it. So how do I draw attention to solidarity? For me, like my most, my most outward expression of that, because I think I do it on a daily basis, talking to people and listening to people and holding, kind of trying to hold space also in my work environment. But I have written one article, like 2 articles actually, but one of them is I like to go from to always observe things from a very personal lens and to not to generalize my experience. And so I take little examples of what I experienced. And my grandmother is a white Brazilian woman, and she always had a picture hanging on her kitchen wall showing a very little picture showing a Black woman. And I always ask myself, who is she? Who is that woman? And my grandmother called her Black mother. And so I shortly before my grandmother died, I interviewed her on her memories on that woman, and I understood, and that is my interpretation, of course, that she exoticized Blackness in a very divided and very racist system in Brazil when she was a little girl. And I kind of tried to unravel this entire story from an anti-colonial point of view, to show, and I think in Brazil it's not very common, unfortunately, yet. There's a very strong Black movement, but I think white solidarity, solidarity from a white perspective, is Okay, that is a huge statement, right? Like that is a huge thesis, but that is what I experience is very rare. And so I tried through this article to show solidarity in the sense that I interrogate our German Brazilian family and the colonial and racist structures within our family, and how these narratives that evolved within that family are constantly being perpetuated as long as we don't interrogate them, and as long as we keep fantasizing and exoticizing a little picture and calling that woman her Black mother, even though she does not know anything about that woman. And so that is one form of how I show solidarity through writing. And I have written other things, but I keep it for here because I see the clock and I want to give space to Theo também. Now I spoke Portuguese to Theo as well.
Well, next time we do a Portuguese conversation room, but I'm not going to be in it. I don't speak Portuguese. So what did I want to say? Yeah, just send Alma a message, connect with her on LinkedIn or Instagram. I hope that you're there, and then she can send you the link to the article, okay? Because I think if we would share it now, it would be a long link and you would have trouble to... No, it's not? Okay, you can share it now as well. So Theo, how do you draw attention to the topic of solidarity? I mean, it's your business, it's very obvious, but maybe you can be a little bit more specific.
Exactly. Our main thing that we are trying is to build learning courses around the topic, and we always start from the gender perspective. So we're always asking the question, how are women impacted by that? How are men impacted by that? How are gender non-conforming people impacted by that? And then we put on the intersectional lens and then ask, and what role does skin color, sexual orientation, age, disability, body weight play? So we have the whole list of different identity markers that we take care of. But actually, for me, we deal mostly with solidarity by, as I said, we believe that we all are interconnected and we are more similar than we are different. And right now we often focus on what is dividing us and what are our differences, and not so much about what are our similarities and what is uniting us. And that is so much more. So, for example, when we talk about mansplaining from a gender perspective, then we can, in the same course, say as well, and the same mechanism is there when we talk about whitesplaining and about straightsplaining. And actually, when we look at power, that is as well there when we talk about momsplaining. So it's about learning the underlying mechanisms and then see how they pop up in different forms in all our lives. So what is basically our shared experience, our shared humanity? And Ellen, you have said you are really afraid when you see police. It's like, I cannot relate to that experience because actually my father is a policeman and my sister is a police officer. So I am very comfortable around police. But an experience that I have is that I feel often very unsafe walking alone as a woman. So I can relate to the feeling of being afraid. And I'm not pretending that I can relate to what it means to be Black and meet a police officer, but I can relate to the feeling of fear. And that is a shared experience that both and I know situations where we actually are, worst case, afraid for our lives.
Yes.
And I don't need to say to you, I know how you feel. I can say, I know as well situations where I am really afraid. And I can see that I can see you in that fear. And that doesn't equalize our situations, but we can connect over that. And we don't need to pretend that there are no differences between us, but that we share an emotion. So we really try to break down, because I know I can sound very theoretical often, but in our app, we actually break it down to really concrete actions, because I don't think it's necessary that everyone needs to come up with their own solutions. We can share what we are all doing. So as you say, just send a heart. advice like that is what we are aiming for to present in our app. And then still everyone is different. So everyone needs to find the way how to deal with the situation. Maybe someone sends a heart, maybe someone sends a voice message, maybe someone writes 2 days later. That's then personality. But actually it's the concrete action that is, again, doing solidarity. And that are really small acts. And we draw the attention to these small acts that in the end really add up to system change, in my opinion. Because discrimination and oppression might be structural, but it manifests in face-to-face interaction between people. If every interaction is equal, the system is gone. So I really see every interaction as an opportunity to choose to act how we want the world to be. And basically see whatever you're saying, like every interaction, every message, see that as that's your opportunity to bring that world into being that you want to see. And then it's not just an email. Then it's actually solidarity in action. Yeah, that was my final plaidoyer.
I love that. And thank you so much for everyone out there for sharing your comments. So please share your feedback, how you feel now leaving this room, leaving this conversation room today in the chat. We would love to hear how you like this conversation. From my side, I can just say that was too short. I knew it's going to be too short. But still, Alma and Theo, I want to give you one last chance to maybe say one sentence of feedback, anything that you want to leave in this room before we wrap up.
Yeah, I would like to share that I'm very grateful and that I have lots of new inspirations to take for my day-to-day practice. And I just wanted to conclude by my perspective that's solidarity, to come back to that term, is really like a collective, liberatory practice. And I think Theo pointed that out very, very well. And at whose core stands care and affection.
I actually would like to end with a quote from James Olivia Chu-Hillman, and she said, "Your relationships are your politics." And that is basically the relationships that you're having. How much are they reflecting your relationships? So, for example, I can say I care about old people, but I never call my grandma. After that quote, I started calling my grandma every day because she's 96, and I don't know how often I can call her anymore. And I think as well, this call that we're having right now, this conversation room, is as well a reflection of our politics, because we talk across difference. I think we talked with a lot of respect for each other. It was a situation where we all felt really nervous, but I really had the feeling that I'm safe with Ellen and Alma. And so that was, again, a situation where we created a world that we want to see. So your relationships are your politics. And I'm really grateful for the relationship with these two.
Now I literally have goosebumps. That was such a nice conversation, and it was uncomfortable, and I learned so much. So I definitely have to watch it again. And thank you everyone out there for being here, for participating with us, for giving us your feedback and interacting with us. We hope to see you again soon. Our next conversation room will probably be up in July, and it's going to be about inclusive schools. So this is going to be a very interesting topic. And for now, I want to thank Annette in the background for your great support. I want to thank my team for putting this event together. I want to thank you, Alma and Theo, for being brave to come here and talk with me. It was my pleasure. It was so nice. So this is it for now. Everyone out there, take good care and see you again. Bye.
Thank you so much.